Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be with you guys and all of you and talking about a topic near and dear to my heart, which is the connection between leadership and business results. And particularly today, we're going to drill a little bit down into some of the dynamics and economics of trust and how it impacts our people and our business results. As we get started, just a brief background. Andrew mentioned we, as Insight Experience, do focus on business simulations for leadership development, and we, in particular, focus on leader development and strategy execution, and that connection between leadership and business results. We work globally across all industries at all levels of management, and with a focus of Fortune 500 to 1,000 clients, Fortune 1,000 clients in general. So just a bit about who we are, based in Boston, with offices across the country and internationally. Today's conversation has four parts, basically. The first thing we want to do is review some data on engagement, on trust, on leadership, and how they drive results, to share our thinking and how it's evolved over the years, and share a model with you that captures some of that thinking and is the underpinnings for some of our simulation model work, to give you a tool you can take away and use immediately in the business, we hope, with your leaders in the business, and an assessment sheet that goes with it, and of course answer any questions you may have about the business. Before we dive into the current data, I just want to take a brief detour into the past, because you might be asking, so what's these guys' credibility base in talking about trust and leadership? Which is to say, we are not primarily a research-based organization, but we work with our client real data and realities, and have been doing that for 15 plus years in this business, and for another 10 plus years in other businesses where we've worked together as a team. And the history of leadership and business results, at least for me personally, goes back to some days with a major telecommunications company you can see on the page, and a major transportation and logistics company. Actually, all the way back to the 90s. When, with Bell South, we worked on a major service excellence initiative for managers and executives and modeled their business as part of that. And in modeling their business, we kind of stumbled across a phenomenon, which was that as those groups of executives and managers ran the simulation, we continually had a pattern of results indicating that employee satisfaction would change first, and then customer satisfaction, and then business results. So we scratched our heads and said, I wonder what's going on here. It turned out that was, in fact, the service profit chain, now well documented, coined by Jim Heskett and Earl Sasser at Harvard Business School, proven by Fred Reichheld at Bain in a lot of research, much of which came out of Capital One, and written up in something called the loyalty effect. And we kind of stumbled on it at about the same time, and in fact did some work, early work with some of the HBS professors as a result of that. The second big data point that pushed us into this was doing extensive work with UPS in their in a bunch of different sides of their business, actually. UPS models their numbers incredibly closely in their business, and they measure everything. And we discovered in modeling their operations that there were some missing elements, which proved to be people elements impacting the direct supervisory relationships. So we began to incorporate more intangible elements like skill and capability, trust and attitude, and morale and attitude, and particularly trust, and thinking about the dynamics that those had on the actual employee relationship and ultimately on business results. So our history is really based on real data in the workplace from clients, then substantiated by research and over the years. So that's our past on it. But more to the present. Today, It's not a pioneering idea. It's a well-known fact that leadership impacts business results. In fact, in the most recent Bersin study, 2015 Global Human Capital Trends study, there's a 35% swing in shareholder value, according to a host of global analysts, equity analysts, polled 16% premium on organizations with strong leadership, almost 20% discount to organizations that have ineffective leadership. So the analysts get it. At some level, intuitively, have always gotten it, but it is very clear that the numbers for the bottom line are impacted by leadership and people's view of leaders. Secondarily, on the inside of organizations, leadership and culture and engagement are now not secondary HR issues. They are, in many cases for CEOs, the primary issues that are keeping them awake at night. In this same study, culture and engagement and leadership gaps were the top two concerns for leaders in business as they look at executing their strategy and succeeding in the marketplace. So I want to move, Andrew, to our first poll and ask you briefly in a word or two to help us with some of your thinking. Why does, in fact, engagement matter in your business? And I'll share some data after that. But let's talk about that. Why does it matter in your business? So if you get the poll going, and we'll see your responses momentarily here, we'll get some thoughts for you. So retaining employees and increasing quality and productivity. Retention, a key dynamic mentioned by Reichheld. Staying in business, I love that. True for us as well. At a medical facility, and our customers need to know that everyone there is part of the big picture and has your interests in mind. It's really coming up in healthcare, fascinating. So engagement drives business results and enables people to deliver their best. We're gonna revisit. We're gonna hammer that one home in the next few slides on data. It has an impact on innovation. Really interesting. I love seeing that. So these are great, Andrew. In the spirit of keeping us on tack, I'm going to move us on. These are terrific answers. So it's about engagement. It's about the bottom line. It is about things like innovation as well. So appreciate that feedback from you all. If you look actually into research in the market, there have been a host of research studies done. That 28 different research studies that precede this data and a variety of impacts. I just picked a couple for the bottom line here. And in 64 organizations from a Connexa study, highly engaged employees had, at those organizations, they were driving twice the annual net income of lagging engagement companies. In a study comparing business units by Gallup, a much larger study, the top quartile of engagement business units had 12% on average higher profitability. I'm just looking at the bottom line here and not at many of the other equally important customer and innovation-related variables, which some of the other 28 studies, which Kevin Cruz cited in a Forbes article, it might be useful if you're interested in some of the data. There's a ton of data out about engagement and business results. So I want to move to the next polling question, Andrew, which is, what do you believe actually are the key drivers for engagement in your organization? We get that it's important, but what is it that we think drives engagement? Is it how much you pay people? Is it the ping pong table in the lunchroom? Is it long weekends? And I see some of you have already are already thinking about this. I'm interested in some of your new answers. So key drivers. Transparency and opportunity. We're going to talk a bunch about transparency in a moment and opportunity. Retention and quality of service. So retention is both an input and an output. Quality of service, I think, customer retention perhaps could be what this viewer is talking about. People's connection to the overall mission and vision of the company and doing good work, key. The behaviors of leaders, we're going to drill deeply into that in a moment, and whether their work has meaning. Okay, a bunch of really savvy answers here. I can tell we have a very savvy audience on this, and so this is great. Let's close this out and push through a little more of this data, which I think is going to substantiate what you all already know, and we're going to get pretty quickly into the meat of some of this trust issue. So. According to a study that a big study that IBM does through partly through its Connexa business unit, they look at employee engagement in two ways, which is what are the impacts of leadership and managerial behaviors, which many of you mentioned, but also they also happen to look at what are the organizational policies and practices and how do those impact people's desire and ability to get work done. We're going to focus on the right side today. These are the controllables in particular for leaders, and I want to say in particular for leaders at all levels in organization, and that's a key message for today, that you do not have to be a senior line leader with budget to make a lot of these impacts. They are not level specific and don't require resources. We'll drill more into that. So a little more specifically, what are in fact some of the behaviors underneath that drive engagement, that drive this key concept of discretionary effort, of people bringing a little more of themselves to work every day to impact business results. We'll come back and talk more about that. But some of the key reinforcing behaviors that IBM found in their studies were confidence and trust in leadership, recognition, employees getting recognition and respect from their leaders and in their organization, having opportunities for growth and development, and having an appropriate balance in their lives, their work lives and the rest of their lives, and in the tasks and the kind of work they do. I want to note that confidence and trust in leadership is a primary behavior in that equation, because that's a common theme through much of the research we looked at. A few other data points here from Dale Carnegie, and of course Gallup has done a ton of work in this area. We all know, it is now common knowledge, that the relationship with your immediate boss is the defining factor for many people. You don't quit the company, you quit your boss. This, back in our UPS days, was a revolutionary concept, I might add. Nobody really believed that, or few did. But also belief in senior leadership is important. You have to have faith in the senior team and where the business is going. And are you proud of the business you work for? Do you have pride in the company overall? Quantum Workplace did a large study in employee engagement trends, and they found three highest related issues in high engagement organizations. The highest scoring issues were: I trust senior leaders, I feel valued, and I'm not going anywhere. As many of you have already noted, the retention piece is big. But again, I want to note that the belief and trust in direct supervision and senior leaders is an important factor in engagement and retention, and we're going to discuss in a few minutes indiscretionary effort. This one is an interesting data point done by a number of academics in an MIT-sponsored study, quoted also by Harvard, which just points out that it's not what your values are on the wall that matters. There's zero correlation between how prominently corporations tout their values. There's no correlation between that and the firm's performance, but there is positive and direct correlation between how employees view the integrity of the company and their leaders and their productivity and profitability in the business. I saved you the standard deviation details around it, but it is an interesting study as noted by Guizot and Gonzalez and others below. But it matters whether you believe your leaders and your organization have integrity. It impacts your productivity, and ultimately it impacts directly the profitability of the business. So that's a little background, and really just to say what you already have told me is substantiated fully by data out there in the marketplace, and I've tossed a number of slides in preparing this for today because there's more data than you can shake a stick at around it. But let's get into the meat of the matter, which is let's talk a little bit about the real underlying dynamics and economics of trust and leadership, all of which is borne out by data, but more importantly by some of your intuition and ours and your life experience. So I want to lead this by asking another question for you all. And this one's a question I just want you to, you don't have to analyze it too fully, but my question for you is what percentage of their true capability, of their true potential, do you think your people bring to work every day and use? Now, I see already there is a bunch of data on this, and so it looks like some of you have gotten ahead of it, which is terrific. This is really interesting data, and I will say now, I'll refer to this later, but I will tell you now, the numbers are shifting. So I can see B is picking up some. B is picking up quite a bit as I'm looking. So the leader is still half to maybe 2/3 of their potential people really bring to work and use every day. And secondarily, 30 to 50. So if we average that all out, 80% of the people are between 30 and 80%. Halfway between 30 and 80 is 50. We're, roughly around half, maybe. So whatever that number was, I want you to remember your personal number, the number that you put in your poll. Jot it down, if you will, because we're going to revisit it at the end. But this is great data. I see it's still moving, but Andrew, I think we can move on. This has given us the meat of the data. Clearly, the meat of the market is around the midway point. So nobody said, by the way, you'll notice 90 to 100%. Everybody said people are leaving something on the table when they come to work every day. So I want to introduce you to a model that we use a lot in our teaching, and in fact it's a model that underpins much of our simulation work, discovered through real-world client experience and backed by, as we can now see, by research. But let's start with looking at this concept called the business cycle of leadership in this segment of it, which is, I don't know about the rest of you, but this is the way I learned about business. When I went to business school, I learned that the decisions you make and the money you spend and where you spend it, how you allocate capital, is the primary driver of business results. And as a leader, you need to make smart, strategic organizational decisions, and that your people will then execute that strategy. And that will drive business results. That'll give you a feedback loop, and then you either have more or less capital to invest in the business moving forward. So pretty interesting. But in fact, the research that has been uncovered, and what many of you said, is in fact that that's not really the leading indicator. The leading indicator is really best thought of as whether your people are willing to execute those decisions that you make in the business. Are they fully engaged? Do they really, because they make or break the decisions you make. So what the business cycle of leadership posits is that the way you lead, and we're going to simplify it brutally to 3 simple things: the priorities you set for the business, how you spend your time as a leader in the business and ask others to spend theirs, and what you say and how you say it. Those 3 simple, non-financial levers are actually the primary drivers of your people's ability and desire to get the work done of the business. So in fact, that leadership, the leadership of your leaders and the engagement they create drives the performance of the business through your people. And if it were otherwise, any old strategy that looked good on paper would have been great in implementation. We all know that the sticky part is when you step out of the classroom and you try to get it done through real people, whether it's change management, innovation, or execution of your existing strategy. That's the challenge. So I want to let you soak on that for a minute that leadership is the leading indicator, and that the business decisions that you make are not, in fact, the primary determinant. And I want to drill now down into the three buckets on the left, the priorities and focus, time allocation, and communication, and spend a couple minutes on that, and then talk a little bit about trust. So when we put people into our immersive experiences, we give them a lot to do, and this mirrors a lot of the tasks that they have to do back at their real work. Leaders either have to form strategy or translate strategy into their level where they sit, to then look at that strategy and say, what are the business priorities, the few that I really need to exercise on and focus on and execute against to be successful? Underneath that, what are the capabilities that I need in the business in order to succeed? And do I have the horses, the talent, the processes to get us there? And if not, what actions am I going to take to get those in the business and to make sure that I have them so that I can take action and get results? In our simulation work, people will go through this cycle multiple times over financial quarters, each taking a few hours to make decisions. In the real world, we do it over the course of real quarters. But what we find, and what we find for leaders in their real world in business, is that when faced with all this complexity, the simple idea of the three levers of the business cycle of leadership tends to get obscured by the challenges in this pyramid. And in fact, people gravitate to the left. They say we have to get clear about solving the problem, about defining the direction, and it leaves not enough time for the alignment of the team. The time spent defining direction and solving the problem robs the time away from the communication and aligning the team. Happens time and again, and people say it happens in their regular day-to-day jobs. Clear definition of direction is critical for the business. People need to know where they're going, and so you have to understand this. But then the question is, how are you spending your time after that, once you've gotten clear definition and direction in the business? So that brings us to the second lever, which is how leaders spend their time. You can see from this research from Workboard that the bulk of manager time out there in the real world is often spent on essential but relatively low impact management tasks at different levels, around monitoring activities, on dealing with administration challenges, on thinking about day-to-day organizational improvements, and on down through the organization. Whereas little time is left for tasks like coaching, communicating, looking out at future trends and direction, making sure that you're setting clear goals for people and empowering folks to get their work done. In the simulation world where we work, people make decisions around how they spend their time over time, and one of the things they discover is that as they are able to spend more time developing their people, their time required for the day-to-day in managing operations actually goes down, which creates a virtuous cycle for them to be able to spend more time in the critical activities that typically get robbed in day-to-day work, of spending time communicating direction, working with your people, coaching, empowering, the things that we all know we should do more of, but honestly get distracted out of in the day-to-day firefighting. So the time allocation is a key. Time is a key asset that's completely non-financial. Our probably most key asset as a business, as a leader in business, and we tend to not think strategically about how we use it. Key lesson for the business cycle of leadership. The third major lever is communication. Also often underserved, as I mentioned, that right side arrow. So the next poll I want to ask of you is, when your leaders are speaking, writing, or communicating, what are your people listening for from them? What do they want to hear from your leaders? What do you want to hear from your leaders out there as they're setting direction and executing around the business for you? What are the things you really need to know from them? So, interesting. It's not so much what they say, it's about alignment. Whoever wrote that, gold star. We're coming to that one. Vision, inspiration. Where are we going, and why should I be excited about it? Are you confident in the strategy and where we're going? Because if you're not as a leader, why should I be? What are we working on in the future, and what have we accomplished? What should I feel good about? What do I need to do next, more specifically? Enough with the big talk. What specifically do I need to do? And by the way, people really want to hear the truth. They don't want to talk around the questions. They want you to answer the correct questions directly. So inspiration, positivity, clarity, consistency, great list. Let's move on, Andrew. These are terrific. We ask this question in our work of leaders every week, and we get the answers just like what you have, and the one that we actually get the least frequently actually is the first one that popped up. So I want to come back to that. What people want to hear in the business is basically four things, which is, where are we going? What is the strategy? Where are we going, and how does my work connect with where we're going, to the bigger picture? How, and therefore, how should I think about my role in the business and how I really impact the business? I want to know how I'm connected. That's part of what inspires me and helps me to do better work. I also want to know what my leaders expect of me. What are the goals? What specifically am I going to get held accountable for, and what do you want me to do? And is the strategy translated tangibly enough so I really know what to do, or is it left at too high a level? Many of you mentioned inspiration and motivation as part of it. We want to hear motivation from our leaders, but even more so, many of us want to know, do you get what it's like where I sit? I'm working 150% and you want me to stretch? Have you come down and sat where I sit in the operation and seen what it's like here, or are you disconnected? So they want both to be inspired, and they want to know that you understand what it's like in their world. And finally, this one that was mentioned first, and it's very rarely mentioned because it usually only shows up in its absence, which is consistency. Is what you're saying and what you're doing the same? Are you telling me the same thing you're telling my workmate? Are you telling me the same things you told me last week and last month? Are your actions and your words consistent? It's that lack of consistency that shows up and that your employees have incredible radar for. When it's consistent, everything's good. But when it's inconsistent, if I ask you what is impacted, the answer we get time and again is trust. Inconsistency breeds questions about trust and integrity in the business and where the leader is going. At the very least, confusion. So that's what your people are listening for, and this is a tool you can take away that may be useful for you and we have an assessment also about whether your communication as a leader is touching on these four elements, because it really helps with the performance of your communication and the impact on your people. To go back to just a little bit of data here, not recognizing employee achievements, as we said, that spirit component, not giving clear direction, not making the time to meet with and recognize with people, maybe taking credit for others' issues. These are communications, top communications that block effective leadership, according to the HBR research. And most importantly is this stat at the bottom, which is the vast majority of leaders are actually missing these crucial day-to-day moments in the business. It's little things that they don't do. They're buried in the operation. They're buried in the things that they're trying to get done today. They're not taking the time in the moment to think about that communication, which doesn't just happen in formal moments. It happens day in, day out in all the things we do and how we meet and interact with people. Those crucial moments are going by the boards, and they're the big opportunities for trust. Because trust, as we'll talk about in a moment, is not built all at once. It's built on lots of tiny little building blocks. And those moments are getting lost often in the business. So let's go back to a piece of the model for a moment, which is we said that how you lead, those three levers, impacts the effectiveness of the decisions implemented by your team, because your team is the one implementing them. And with a little more granularity, the priorities and focus you set for the business, how you spend your time, and ask others to do the same, what you say and how you say it. Those things impact the ability of your people to do their work, their desire to do their work, their attitude about the business in general, and more, perhaps most importantly, as we've looked at in some of the research already, whether they trust you as the direct supervisor and as senior leaders in the organization as a whole enough to bring more of themselves to work, to engage and really bring their best work to the table. So I want to look at a little bit of the math around that, because skill and morale, if you think about it, are pretty simple. More skill is good, less skill is better. More morale is good, less morale is better. It's fairly simple math to think about. Trust is a little different beast. It's more complex, and it has some unique dynamics. So let's look at a few of those dynamics, and we all have our own experience with trust, so put it through that filter as you think about it. Some unique things about trust. The power in trust actually lies not with the leader, but with the employee. Trust has no power until it's given away. It has no value. It's an interesting commodity. Until it's given away, it's valueless. It only exists when somebody, you or I, decide to give it to our leader, and we can take it back in an instant, which does an interesting thing to the employee-leader value proposition and where the power truly lies, because it suggests that the power truly lies with the employee, not with the leader, because at any moment we can choose to take it back or to give more of it. Now, on the math front, if we think about it from an economic perspective, we dove deep into this many years ago and continue to refine our thinking around it, is how does trust work, really? How does it impact capability, credibility, and results? Well, in simplified way, when trust is high, the good things you do as a leader get multiplied, and the bad things you do kind of get divided. They get filtered. You get the benefit of the doubt. When trust is low, the bad things you do just get multiplied. And even if you do the right thing, you don't really get the full benefit of it. Let's look at that in the format of a few decisions. So in a high trust environment, let's look at that first. If you as a leader, each of you as a leader, make good decisions and do the right thing, what happens? Well, it reinforces this positive cycle of building trust, this positive cycle of, I trust Nancy, I'm willing to give more to her because she's doing the right thing. I'm probably going to give her positive feedback. You get positive feedback as a leader, and you get it because people are willing to bring it to you because they trust you. And you're more likely to take action with someone that you trust, or a business unit that you trust. If as a leader you make the wrong decision and you actually do the wrong thing, you get the benefit of the doubt. You say, if I make a wrong decision, you might say about me in a high trust environment, oh, Nick, he didn't mean to do that. That was an unintended consequence of a well-intentioned action. And in fact, he probably needs to know that he had an unintended consequence. So not only will they assume good intent, they're going to give you feedback, and they're going to let you know that you made a mistake, which, as we'll look at in a moment, is critical to your ability to lead. Flip the coin. Low trust. You make a good decision and do the right thing, people are suspicious. People are saying, you just haven't seen the other foot fall yet. The other shoe hasn't hit the ground. I've seen this movie before. He's not really making a good decision. He's not really doing the right thing. The truth has not yet emerged. So they'll wait. They'll engage in an action, and by the way, they're not about to give you feedback because they don't trust you enough. And of course, if you do the wrong thing, then it's just confirming their expectations, their belief, and they continue to not give you feedback, and they'll never move. So this is a problem if you're trying to create change in an organization or innovation, as many of you mentioned. If people have a bias to keep their heads down and not follow you into the dark, you're in trouble. Let's go back to the cycle then and close out with some with some thoughts about what you create as a leader when you live the cycle. So the way that you lead creates that environment of skill, of ability, of attitude and morale, of trust in leaders, of trust in the organization, which can be the steroid that drives the business, the superpower that pushes your people through difficult changes and times and difficult implementation decisions in the business. But there's more that happens than this simple arrow, the coming back to inform business results. As you do that, as you exercise those three leadership levers, you actually create a culture in your business. And it's either a culture of transparency and truth and empowerment, or it's not. And that has a profound impact on the perspectives and the information that your people are willing to bring you in the organization. Are they willing to bring you the truth? Because in the absence of that, as you become more senior in your organization, the inevitable truth is that people will bring you what you want to hear and have a bias to bring you good news instead of bad news, to bring you good news instead of the truth. And that's the most dangerous thing as a leader that can happen to you, because it's like being a horse in Central Park in New York. The older you get, the closer the blinders get around you, and pretty soon all you can see is the patch of ground in front of you, and you miss all the peripheral clues that could help you be a more effective leader. And by the way, you don't get the feedback on your leadership to know what to do more and less of, to know how to spend your time differently, to know how to communicate more effectively, or adjust the priorities in the business because things aren't working the way they should. So culture is critical. And if you want to know whether culture is important to your people, then go and look at any number of data out there in the marketplace. But the Burson data says that 95% of current job applicants believe that culture is more important than compensation. Fewer than 5% think compensation rules. Culture is everything. And the way you live as a leader, the business cycle of leadership, really shapes the culture you create and the results you get. How does it show up in the real world? Well, the good, the bad, the ugly. There are many good examples out there. I've listed a few of these in some terrific cultures. I'm personally familiar with some of the work of Ford and how Alan Mulally helped guide that organization through the most difficult downturn in the history of this country and kept that business out of government bailout hands, the only American auto company that could do it, and he did it through really clear direction and communication and alignment and priorities and focus for the business, and a really different way that he spent his time and communicated than the way predecessors had led that business, so that everyone was crystal clear and on the same page about where the business was going. Ford's results today are no accident as a result of that leadership and culture that was created. The bad, well, in the middle, whether it's Enron and their scandal or Home Depot with their IT challenges in 2014 when they had a huge data breach and engineers identified it and senior management said we sell hammers and didn't hear them. The bad, we lose money, maybe people go to jail. Unfortunately, in the ugly, people die. Lack of leadership and trust and transparency, as Colin Powell has said, on the battlefield costs lives. It cost lives in the Challenger incident with NASA, and it cost lives on the Titanic, and it cost lives at GM most recently over the last 10 years with the ignition failure and 13 deaths that resulted from a culture that lacked transparency and truth-telling at the highest levels, and Mary Barra's challenge is to change that as she leads the transformation of that organization. So there's all kinds of examples about that. Out there in the marketplace. But now, as we move to a close, I want to come back to the number I asked you to think about. I said I'd share mine at the end, and I will. I've been asking that question, and in our company we've been asking that question about what percentage of capability and potential do people bring to work every day. And in fact, the number mirrors what you said and have been saying, others have been saying for 10 years. The number is between 50 and 60. Incidentally, my colleague and friend Jack Zenger at Zenger Folkman has been asking the same question in a different way about what percentage of capability organizations allow people, employees to unlock, and he's gotten the same number. So we have some commonality around what this number is. But whatever your number personally was, whether it was 30% or 70%, the question is, first of all, the reality is it's not 100%. And the question for you is, if it was 30, do you think that in the behaviors of your leaders, in what they do and how they do it, the way they spend their time, the way they communicate, the priorities and focus they set for the business, they could allow their organizations and get people to want to bring 3% more if you're 30, 5% more if you're 50, maybe 7% more tomorrow if you're at 70. Is that conceivable? Ask yourself that question. And if so, simple math would say that's a 10% productivity improvement for the organization. And what would you pay in your organizations for a 10% productivity improvement? And what would be the impact on your bottom line? There are no silver bullets in business, but I'd submit to you that thinking about trust and that dynamic and the commitment of your people is the closest thing there is, because there's enormous untapped potential in your businesses through your people. And I hope that in looking at this simple model of the business cycle of leadership and those three simple non-hierarchical truths that don't require money, that can be done at any level in the organization, there are some insights into how you might unlock some potential for your leaders in the business. And with that, I think, Andrew, we have a few more minutes for questions, so I'm happy to turn it over and see what questions people have.
Absolutely, Nick. Well, first off, before we get to the questions, let me thank you for providing such great research and theory on this economics of trust topic. I think it's been very well served to our members, so I appreciate all of the work that you and the folks at Insight Experience have done in preparing for this presentation, as well as delivering it. So I think it really helped out sort of framing this issue and bringing it to our members in practical terms. So thank you so much. Let's get to the questions. I'll remind our members that if you haven't asked a question at this time, now's the appropriate time to do so. So please type your question into the chat box. We'll get to as many as we can in the time that we have remaining. And for those who may not get their questions asked and answered, just attach your name to your comment, and we'll be able to get you in touch with Nick and the folks from Insight Experience offline, and they'll be able to get to your question directly. So first off, let's get to a question from Janelle, and I think this is a good one to start us off, in large part because I think it speaks to a little bit about the rehabilitation of trust. And so Janelle asks, in context, she says, Nick, in your opinion, can a high-level leader that is known to be disengaging, can he or she be rehabilitated? And what would be your sort of best practices for beginning that rehabilitation and rebuilding trust?
I love that question. Was it Jeanette or Janelle? I love that question. Rehabilitation. Well, I have to say, if you look at our at the U.S. The penal system, and even some of the recent California decisions about letting some criminals back out on the street, our recidivism history in the U.S. from a public perspective is not good. The record is not good. In leadership, can someone like that be fixed? Well, I think that gets back to, I guess, a primary question and a belief you have about people. The data is that people can, but not all have and are. If you think of Chainsaw Al at Sunbeam or many others, the answer for some people is they don't choose to change. But in our experience, if they are presented with data that is convincing, that convinces them that they are not, that their behaviors are ineffective in driving the business results that they want to achieve, they're open to that conversation. But it's often difficult to have as just a behavioral feedback conversation, because they have an underlying set of beliefs that probably shaped their success to date, that what they do actually has historically created positive business results. So you have to show them the data, which is why we focus so much on the link between the behaviors and the results. And the good news is today those links are much more accepted than they were. So it tends to be more senior leaders who have a lot of tenure in command and control organizations that have a lot of history that leads them to believe that it's not about trust, it's about clear direction one way. But you got to show them the data, and the data has to be in the language that they respect and respond to, not which may not be behavioral. That may be what you bring up later once they understand that it's connected. I love that question. Terrific question.
Thank you, Nick. That's a great way to...
And I'm sure if you look at...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to say that's a great...
I was going to say if...
Yes?
If you have questions about that, you can, further questions I might add, you can look at the research of Carol Dweck out of Stanford around growth mindset versus fixed mindset, which is a really wonderful set of research and data. And of course, the popular leadership guru Marshall Goldsmith will tell you that anyone can change as long as they use the right behavior and processes. But I think you have to have the right motivation in place. They have to see that they need to for their own success. Back over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So that's a good segue, and thanks for providing those resources. I think that's helpful as well to try to find those areas where we can sort of point to more prescriptive methods for doing this. But Zach brings up a good point. That's a good segue from your last rehabilitation question, which is Zach asks if you have a point of view on measuring these dimensions, or how one can see the returns to an investment in building the training and trust, as opposed to some of the returns to the business decisions and capital allocation. So how do you make that case when you're trying to point directly at the trust capability versus some of the other sort of obviously correlated business elements? But what would your recommendation be, Nick, in trying to translate some of these metrics into real actions through the C-suite?
Great question, Zach. And I think part of the challenge is in many organizations, the collection of that data, which may occur in parts of your human resource organization or with engagement companies, many companies like Gallup and Connexa and others who are employed and engaged by lots of corporations. They collect that data, but they don't use it so much as a bridge to actually provide feedback and change to senior leaders on their own behaviors. They view it as sort of an HR metric. How are our people doing? I think what you need to do is you need to take that data, which is probably collected in your organization somewhere, and connect it to the financial and operating data of the business. And in leading organizations where the CHRO is becoming a member of the senior team, if you look at the current issue of Harvard Business Review that has the picture of blowing up the HR organization on it, interestingly, Ram Charan is lobbying that the CEO, the C-level team in organizations moving forward will become a triumvirate of the CEO, the CFO, and the CHRO, the Chief Human Resource Officer. And the specific reason he is suggesting that is because he believes the metrics of human capital need to be brought in and up to par and to the same level as the financial metrics and held accountable to the same standards. Now, I think we're 5 or 10 years away from that in most of our businesses, but that is clearly the direction things are moving, because as organizations have moved from the industrial to the knowledge capital age, it is truly about our people, which we all intuitively know, or we wouldn't be on this call. But we don't have good metrics that connect it. The data that I showed at the beginning of this presentation, the purpose of that was to say, hey, look, the engagement and employee satisfaction, commitment, engagement data is clearly connected to business results. You can connect it to satisfaction, retention, attrition, profitability, revenue growth, cost control, innovation, safety, any of that stuff in the front of the deck that you look at will show that those metrics are clear. The gap, I think, is in making the connection between the engagement piece and leaders, and saying, if as leaders we're not managing that, then we are missing the back end of that calculation. So I think the data probably exists in two places in your organization, and the problem is it's not getting seen on the same page by the right people.
Excellent point. I love the raising of the CHRO to that same level, so that it's like you mentioned, that triumvirate as mentioned in the HBR issue. I think is a great way to try to. It's an aspirational goal, obviously, like you mentioned. A lot of us aren't there yet, but it's definitely something that is worth taking the steps to get there, because if you don't, you're never going to get there. So here's a question. This one unattributed, but here we go. It's from one of our members. Given most managers spend their time on non-essential tasks, okay, assuming that's true, what specific strategies or tactical actions have you seen that work to help managers start to learn how to focus their time on some high-value activities? And I imagine, and this is sort of my commentary to this question, is that through some of these high-value activities, they might be fostering that type of trust in their direct reports as well as in the leadership. So knowing, as you mentioned, the engagement link to direct managers, what is your best advice for managers in terms of finding a better way to focus their time to become, true strategic contributors to the business?
Well, that's a really great question, unattributed. I thank you for it. And it's one we all wrestle with, and we wrestle with all at our own companies and our client companies. I have a simple answer to that, and I don't mean it to sound simplistic, is you need to ask your people. The people that are getting your time or not getting your time, are they getting what they want and need? They will tell you. They will tell you, and if you ask, don't ask the questions is Nick busy? Is unattributed busy? Is the stuff that he or she is doing useful to the business? That's a bit of a trap. The question is to ask them, do your people understand where they're going in the business? Do they feel like they're getting the support and the coaching and the development they need? Are they clear about the business? If you ask the questions about how satisfied and engaged they truly are, I think you'll find some really useful insights into that question. And you can directly ask the question of your people, how could I spend my time differently to be more effective in the business? Don't ask them if the way they're spending their time now is useful or not, because that, as I say, is a trap. But your people know. So there's lots of places you could go to get bigger picture data, but what your managers want is the data from their direct people in terms of feedback, saying, because often the feedback in 360s isn't about questions like, how do I spend my time? Those simple questions of communication, priorities, and time management are often not the questions of 360 feedback surveys. And those are really useful questions. Do I spend my time most effectively in the business, and what could I do more and less of that would help you do your job better?
Great advice, Nick. I think when you talk about all the data that's available, there's a lot of ways to get bogged down in it, and sometimes it's just the simple, straight answer from a real person that can give you the greatest insight of all. So thanks again, Nick. We've run out of time for the webcast, but I encourage our members to reach out Insight Experience's contact info is on the screen right now, so if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. I'm sure they're going to be really helpful and willing to answer any specific issues that you might have regarding this topic or anything else involved in terms of the whole engagement, trust, and collaboration and innovation. I've done a lot of webcasts with the folks from Insight Experience, and I come away each time having a better understanding of sort of the linkage between sort of the talent management issues and, of course, the business issues, and that alignment is really critical going forward, as Nick indicated. So, Nick, thanks again. I appreciate you coming on to the webcast, and I look forward to the next time we get an opportunity to work together again.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks all for your time. Have a great day.
All right, everyone, and we will sign off with a big thank you to each and every one of our HCI members who've taken the time to join us today. We look forward to seeing you all on another webcast soon. This concludes the webcast agenda for this week, but tune in next week for more HCI webcasts. We look forward to seeing you all on the next one soon. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.